This is the Education Business Podcast for consultants and business owners providing services in schools. I'm Claire Riley, and I'll be sharing how to start, grow and scale your education business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. I have a guest with me today, and the guest is Ed again, Ed Riley. If you don't know, Ed is my co-founder at Classroom Secrets. Also, I happen to be married to him. I married him before becoming a co-founder. It wasn't like, we started the business and then we had to get married to each other. It was the other way around. Anyway, let's talk about why he's here on the podcast today. So you might be aware that I took the role of CEO for a number of years, 2019, I think, to 2023. And then Ed stepped into the role of CEO, and it has been a really great transformation, actually. And so I thought it would be a great episode to get Ed in, talk to Ed about his experience of stepping into CEO, especially because he is a founder of this business. And I know that we'll be able to learn some things as a community about Ed's journey and what he's learned. So, Ed, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
So, Ed, when you stepped into the role of CEO, one of the things that we very clearly said together, because we came up with the realization based on things that were happening in the company, I think it kind of fell on us both, which is always a good sign when we're so aligned, that it was the right thing for the company. And we said that you would do the role differently to me, because I suppose when I was a CEO, I was already half chairman. So do you want to talk about how you saw that role differently, or do you want me to talk about how the role was different to the role I did?
I think I could just go into it. I think for me, it's about having a fresh pair of eyes on it, looking from a different perspective. We're a great partnership, but we are different. And then as we've gone through the DISC profiling previously, haven't we? We're practically opposite on the DISC profile. You're very entrepreneurial and I'm probably more data and fact driven. So inevitably there was always it was going to be different from a different perspective and a different pair of eyes. And obviously I'm not a teacher either. We grew this business with you leading the business as CEO, having a history of being a teacher. I didn't have that teacher element, so that's also a difference there. Obviously, again, it works really well with you being in the chairman position because you're not completely gone. So I still have that ability to, if I've got any questions or anything I need to discuss with you that are that kind of teacher related type stuff, I've got the ability to do that, which is really great and helpful to know as well.
Also helpful with that we're in the same house.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Have catch-ups at lunchtime and things, don't we?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
But I think as well, just thinking about that difference and the fact that, you are more data-driven and you don't have a teaching background, I actually think that transition fits really well into the maturity of the business, because one of the things we've really tried to do over the last 4 or 5 years is fix a lot of the issues that we created, which is what we do when we, work with other education business entrepreneurs. Really try and streamline things, smooth things out, because we're building the foundations for a really great growth trajectory, to make sure that growth can be really smooth and seamless. So I think there's an element of being the right time as well for somebody who's more data-driven and more factual to be in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of with that comes what's the plan and how we're going to execute that plan perspective as well. Because we know it's important to have a clear plan, but then it's also important to understand how you're going to kind of step through that plan and break that down, and what are what data you're kind of going to look at as you're going through that plan to measure the progress through that plan and also the success of it. That's definitely a perspective that I look at.
Yeah, that's definitely a strength of yours, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I like to think so.
So you stepped into this role in July last year,
Mhm.
so you're not quite 12 months into it. But as you became the CEO, what were your first priorities in the role that people could learn from?
I think it was understanding what the company needed to kind of, like Claire says, to go to kind of almost rebuild those foundations. Because looking back at the history of where we got to, the chaos of that and the growth trajectory we've been on, we needed to sort of get things in order in many areas, like you say. And I think it was kind of looking at what we needed to really sort of clean up, tidy up, get into a strong position to get on that trajectory of growth that we're heading towards now. So that was kind of the first sort of priorities, really.
So what do you think the key differences are then between the role that you had before, which was CTO, and your role now as CEO?
I think if I had to pick one word, it would be control. And I think there's a difference there between, when I'm saying control, I'm not saying I'm controlling every single minute element. It's the overall control of the plan, the direction, etc., that we're going with, which is different to delegating some tasks. Sometimes you can over-delegate, you can give away that control with that delegation process, which ultimately might mean that you lose control of what effectively is your business and your vision. So I think that's one key area that is definitely a difference now. Is for me personally feeling like the control is there.
And that's something I think we've definitely learned, isn't it? And we, this is the evening talk sometimes that we have. And I know I've shared it with a few members of the community that I've been in contact with recently. That thing of you read all the books and they'll tell you that you need to let go. But one thing that we've really taken away from that through this journey is that doesn't mean let go of control.
Yes.
And that was probably something that had happened a little bit too much, really. So is that, if there's one thing you could take away from that episode, that is a huge learning that we have had, that letting go doesn't mean letting go of control. And not micromanaging, we're not talking about that, are we?
No.
But making sure that everything's going in the same direction, because otherwise that means people can be pulling in different directions and then you're not going anywhere.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the other area of difference would be the level of responsibility. So if you think, previously my role was CTO, so looking after the technology of the business, which, in a hell of a good analogy, think about in a CTO role, I might have had a handful of jigsaw pieces, whereas in the CEO role, I'm looking after the whole jigsaw. So I think that's a key difference in level of responsibility, which is different. And when I'm saying that, I don't think it's necessarily about a different level of pressure or stress or anything. It's just a different level of responsibility, but different thing. So that would be another difference. I think the other thing as well is in the CTO role was very much could be viewed as an advisory type role, an expert advisory type role, I guess you would probably say, whereas the CEO role is a lot more of a overall control and decision-making role as well.
I also think as well, it worked for us at the time, but me as CEO, you as CTO, sometimes the whole thing, the jigsaw was split. Whereas now you have control of the whole jigsaw. I think that works better. And me as chairman, I do also have like this advisory role in some areas, but also keeping the board to account really and making sure that I'm keeping you to account.
Yeah, but exactly. Ultimately, the high level strategic plan direction of the business is set by the board, and it's my job to go away and make sure that I deliver that with the team that I've got at my hand, I suppose. That's my job ultimately.
Yeah. And so I think we've definitely seen benefits, haven't we, of you having the whole jigsaw instead of us trying to hold parts of the jigsaw between us. And also, you know, there was a time where we had a managing director in place as well. And so they definitely had parts of the jigsaw. And I think there's definitely a benefit to bringing the jigsaw back together.
And I remember, in the very early days of me stepping into that role in July, there was definitely instances where I would be sat there sort of, making the decision. And I think there was instances where it felt like sometimes we made decisions by committee. And that's not, I don't mean that nobody was doing anything wrong. It was just the way we'd evolved. But sometimes there needs to be an ultimate decision maker. And I think that's what I see my role as. And I will speak to people and get perspectives and opinions and advice, but ultimately the decision sits with me.
And we're not talking about small decisions here, are we?
No.
You need processes in place to make sure people can make their own decisions and things.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate as well that perhaps you're thinking, gosh, this is so far in our future. But we're trying to give you what we never had. That's the whole point of Education Business Club, to give you those insights before you need them so that you can use them as you step forward. And in some ways, I feel like we've given ourselves that. I've had a lot of conversations in this last week about business in general and businesses in our sector. And I know at Classroom Secrets, some of the things that we've done and the mistakes that we've made while we're still relatively small will really actually help the fact that we've done it when we're small, to be able to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes again as we get bigger. And that's really a gift that we're trying to give to you.
Absolutely is, yeah. Benefit of our experience.
Yeah. So I feel like we've kind of gone through this already, but what do you think the benefits are of being founder and CEO at the same time?
I mean, I've been here for the journey. I've been here since the beginning. I know the journey we've been on, and I know the business inside out because of that. And I know why we started it. I know I was there in those early conversations where Claire's saying to me, seeing the gap in the market, do you think you could build me a website? Could we do this thing? And, I was there. And obviously, ultimately, I've got skin in the game. So, and as a business owner, that's what it is. Ultimately, you think, well, actually, why am I doing this thing? Well, it's for the benefit of my family around me and my future and my kids' future, etc. If you've got children, yeah, that's the real benefit of it. I'm really, really invested in it. I'm not just come in as a CEO, as an employed role at this point in the journey, So, yeah.
Yeah. The history is so important, isn't it? I think that's something that we really do value at Classroom Secrets. Not to continue the history, but to have learned from the history, because it's really easy to just carry on making the same mistakes with new team members, and so history is important. So, you're CEO now. Obviously, I've stepped into chairman, which I know people find that so difficult when people start the conversation and they go chair person because they're so worried about what to say. They've forgotten that I said I'm chairman. But how long do you see yourself being CEO for?
Not forever. For me, it's about getting this whole conversation about building the value in the business. And if I, as co-founder as well, the extra context there, if I'm key to that business operating day to day, then I detract from the value of the business ultimately, because if there's a point of exit later and I'm critical to the business, that makes that process a whole lot harder. So, it's not now, it's not now certainly, but it's, into the future, there'll be a point at which we extract me from the business, if you like, in a day-to-day operational role for certain, because we need to be able to package that up essentially and to get that value in the business. whether or not there's an exit at that point or not, there needs to be kind of a preparation for that.
I love that. I told you the questions beforehand, but I didn't ask for your answers. And I love that you brought that in because, one of the things I've really been talking about on the podcast recently is building value in your business. And yeah, we're probably talking about something that is a long time away for you right now if you're listening, but we're still on that journey. Like, we want to help you do what we did in the early days, but what's right for your business. And then you get to this point where both of you are not in the business, or maybe you're the only founder. Well, it won't be as easy for you to step out of the business as I've done. Your role is probably more like Ed's, but there is a point where you can absolutely do that, and it really will add value to your business, because then it is just like, it's like having a property that you rent out. It's an asset, but it should have a ton more value than an apartment.
Yeah. It's about building that well-oiled machine that can run without you. It's not easy. It can be. It's frightening as well. And it's, of course, that kind of area of control we talked about earlier. Sometimes I think people think letting go of some of these things relinquishes that control, and it's a massive balancing act, because there's an element of control of being operational in the business, but it's not the only way that you can exert that control. Ultimately, it's a journey to get to that, and a journey we're still on, I think, is probably fair to say. But once you get to the point where you've got those clear overarching plans in place, and you know where you're going, a longer term perspective, that enables that process to kind of accelerate, I think.
Becoming CEO, what have you had to give up or stop doing that you did before?
I think the main thing is probably the hands-on technical stuff, because as CTO, I was afforded the luxury of being able to be in that senior leadership position and have, as co-founder as well, obviously have the ability to influence the trajectory of the wider business. But also there was definitely instances where I was able to get back to the fiddling around with systems, setting systems up, testing things, looking at, building stuff, which I could lose hours in. So definitely some of that stuff, because I'm not in a position where I'm afforded that luxury of time to be able to do that kind of stuff today. I'm very lucky that I've got an excellent colleague who works in our IT department who's able to kind of plug that gap with some support and guidance. So, that's one thing I've definitely had to give up.
Yeah. But you still get to do it a little bit, don't you? Because obviously you're consulting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that kind of,
I suppose it's at a smaller level. I think you can execute that a lot faster because you've done it all before.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is really, you would lose hours in it because it's new to us as a business.
Correct. Still working out
and new
testing
to you.
It, trying things out. Absolutely that. Yeah. And that's where I could lose out. I would enjoy that as well. I know that's not everybody's bag. So that's the benefit of exactly as you say, the benefit of my kind of having trodden that path as well. So when I've been supporting some of our other businesses we work with, it's things that I know how to do because I've been there, worked it out.
Yeah. Do you enjoy being the CEO?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That sounds like but.
No, it wasn't the question we had written down. No, I do enjoy it. It's different. I'm not quite a year in yet. There's been lots going on. There's still lots going on. We've obviously got some plans into the future that I'm looking forward to kind of seeing the results of. I think there's a lot of work in progress things at the moment, but isn't there always? But yeah, it's good.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. Sorry I didn't ask you that question beforehand, but I think I've asked you that as a wife, and you said you did, so I thought that would be okay. So just to finish off then, we can think of CEOs and we can think, oh my word, that means like 70-hour weeks. That's the same as when I was in teaching, if you were a teacher before. What do you actually do in the role of CEO? Because I know that is a question people always want to ask me. What do you do as chairman? What do you do as CEO? How many hours do you work, and what do you actually do?
I think I'll answer the question first in terms of how many hours I work. I actually work school hours, essentially. So, try and still maintain that, which is something that Claire and I worked hard to get to be able to do that. So you kind of really kind of in control of your calendar. So yeah, I work the school hours essentially. Sometimes I won't say that there aren't instances where there's a little bit here and then in the evenings or having to jump on calls at short notice for things that you don't foresee. But generally speaking, I managed to maintain that working school hours. To the point of what does a CEO actually do, or what do I do as CEO? And because I think it's different in every business, depending on the size of your business, depending on you as an individual and your style. Essentially, in a nutshell, I execute the plan that's been agreed at a strategic board level, and I do that by working with my team, which are my senior leaders. So I will be in regular conversation with them, ensuring that they've got their plans in place at a departmental level, that they're looked after. Are they okay from a well-being perspective? As a line manager as well, I suppose. What do they need to execute their job? And just basically supporting them with that. One of the things that I don't do enough of yet, and I'm still a year in, and there's still some progress to be made on this, I think is getting back on the floor and talking to more people in the business. But I think that's an important thing, is like getting the temperature internally within the business and understanding what's going on. And I can get that via my senior leaders, and we do talk regularly about that, but see what some of the challenges might be, some of the issues might be as well. Listening to what's happening with our customers, what projects have we got going on, and making sure they're on track and they're going to be delivered in time. Maintaining the cost base from a financial perspective, where are we with that? We're making sure we're managing expenses. What's the revenue? Are we on target with revenue? If we're not in some of those areas, what we need to do about that to resolve that. So yeah, all sorts of different things like that. Varied role really. But again, it's important to say that's the way that it works in our business for me, and the structure we've got in place. That could look very different for your business, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's what's right for you and your business.
Yeah, this is more just about what you can possibly pick up. I think the more we're experiencing business and the more you listen to and learn from other people, the more you will listen to a podcast episode like this and see value in the one thing that you pick up, rather than expecting everything to be fresh and new. Like, if you've got any experience in business, that is not going to be the thing. You're looking for what jumps out at you to be the thing that you need to hear today.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you've picked up at least one thing that you think could be useful to help you on your education business journey today.
Hope so.
So Ed, thank you so much for joining me again. Maybe we'll get you back on at some point for a risk episode. Don't want to record that today though, but that'll be some point in the future. So thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you.
And you best get back to work now at Classroom Secrets.
Yes, boss.
So anyway, thank you so much for listening to the Education Business Podcast, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. To get more information to grow your business, sign up at educationbusinessclub.co.uk.